And welcome to Eye on New Mexico. I'm Chris Ramirez. This morning we're talking about solitary confinement in our jails and prisons across New Mexico. Now I invited these two gentlemen to join the conversation, and they've really proved to be some of the best experts in our state about this issue. Matt Coit is an Albuquerque-based attorney, and Greg Morkenthal is the Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Department of Corrections. Thank you both for being here this Sunday morning.
Thank you for inviting us.
Well, the entire model of the American criminal justice system has a goal of rehabilitating criminals then putting them back on the streets in a better condition than before they went to jail. But here in New Mexico, many people are far worse after getting released. Now, I did a 4-on-your-side investigation. My team exposed how one county jail admits that they can't keep up with the inmates with mental health issues, and they are accused of leaving them in solitary confinement for years. Take a look. Joe Chavez is the warden of the Valencia County Jail. Warden Chavez claims Jan was kept in solitary because she bothered the other female inmates, denies Jan was ever deprived of her sanitation needs, but admits Jan was a problem for him.
And that was the thing with her, you just never know what you're going to get with Jan.
And he admits Jan did have special needs.
So we knew she had mental health issues, that her behavior was erratic, to say the least.
The warden tells me his jail has one nurse practitioner who comes in 4 hours a week to work with mentally ill inmates.
Our mental health is really adequate. I just think we lacked, our mistake was the lack of documentation showing that we actually did provide very good care for her. And
just to kind of repeat what you said that you have a nurse practitioner who comes in 4 hours a week and isn't very good at documenting what she does.
No, I don't want to say that. It's a psych nurse practitioner. Yeah, it's a psych nurse practitioner. She'd come in, and when she would see, it's documented, but when they would go to the back to do a booking intake, to do an assessment on other inmates, they would just stop by, "Hey Jan, how you doing?" And all that wasn't documented. All that everyday stuff.
But that's not really care.
No, it's not.
That's just being human. I mean,
right.
if I saw you, I would say, "Hey warden, how are you doing?" But that doesn't mean I'm providing medical care for you. Again, that nurse had to talk to every male and female at the jail to make sure they were okay, and only had 4 hours a week to do it. I'm not a psychiatrist, and I don't have any medical training, but 4 hours a week for your entire population hardly seems adequate at all.
It just depends on the... I guess that's and you're right. I have to agree with you that for mental health population, it is not adequate. I believe we do need more mental health treatment in these facilities, because we are becoming how would you say, we're becoming mental health facilities more than dealing with people that have committing actual crimes.
By government statistics, Jan Green is one of 85,000 people in solitary confinement at any given time. She was also part of the 1/3 jail population suffering from a mental illness, and Warden Chavez admits he neither has the resources nor the funding to deal with it.
We're just not equipped for dealing with the mental health population.
I guess it's a an economic decision not to provide mental health care, but it's a very short-minded or narrow-minded or short-sighted economic decision, because you pay for it on the other end.
Jan's attorney, Matt Coit, sued Valencia County for the way they treated her. The county settled for $1.6 million. Get this, the total budget for mental health care at the jail, a mere $250,000.
It's a silly cost saving if you're going to do that.
The settlement also demands that Valencia County can no longer leave anybody in 135 Charlie longer than 48 hours, and that anybody with a mental health diagnosis sees a professional at least once a week.
Well, it's a start, but it isn't the end by any means.
I really believe that some of the changes that we were able to establish are going to be very helpful.
Some people might say, these are inmates, they're prisoners. Why should we care about them? To those people, what would you say?
They're human beings just like you and I. Jan Green, my mom, she's someone's mom. She's somebody's grandmother. She's somebody's sister.
As we start a conversation, I just want to make something abundantly clear. Greg Marcantel is not in charge of that facility at all. It's a county jail, and Secretary Marcantel is in charge of the state prison system, which is separate from county facilities. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Let's start with you, Matt. Your concern has always been the mental health, or the lack of mental health that inmates are receiving in our facilities. What are some of your main concerns? We saw the case of Jane Green here in the story, but there's more.
Well, I think the story that you ran and seeing the interview with the warden of the facility, Mr. Chavis, it's very disappointing to see what he said and how he reacted to your questions, because I don't think he understands. He doesn't understand that the kind of acting out that he says that Jan had is not a question of Jan. It's a question of placing her in a solitary cell without medical care, and then you act out. You create the problem yourself, and then throw your hands up in the air and say, I've got a problem. And I think that's very unfortunate to this day that he hasn't figured that out.
We've been talking about mental health and segregation in our prison systems. Right before we went on the break, Matt was talking about how he feels that there's too much segregation going on, and you had 16% at any given time being segregated. Secretary, you're saying that maybe those numbers are not as you see them.
Well, I mean, here's what I would say. We've identified 9.6% of our population. That's still too high. I mean, so at the end of the day...
9.6.
9.6. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think we can agree that we have traditionally grown into overuse of segregation. There'll be no disagreement on that. So for the sake of time, rather than debate 16% versus 9.6.
Well, if I may, you're right. Maybe a debate on the numbers. The number 16 that came from the legislative committee meeting. But if it's wrong, it's because we don't know. It's very hard to know how many people are in solitary or in segregation at any one time. We need some more transparency. I think the Vera Institute, when they made their report, talked about the difficulties in ascertaining the actual numbers in segregation at any given time. So I think one step is to identify the problem, but I agree with you, Greg, in saying that it's too big, whatever the problem is, it's too large.
I want to jump to another story. One of the most notable examples of a system that did not work is the case of Stephen Slevin. In January 2012, a federal jury in Santa Fe awarded him $22 million. Yes, that's $22 million. Slevin says that after being arrested for a DWI charge in Doña County in 2005, he was put in solitary confinement for 2 years, basically forgotten about. Stephen Slevin was tossed in jail and basically rotted away. He was there for so long, his toenails even started curling around his foot. Here's the story that we ran back in 2012 with Mr. Slevin.
I feel like we made a statement today, a large statement.
Will change a lot of lives.
It's the moment Stephen Slevin has craved for the past 5 years.
Why they did what they did, I have no idea.
Arrested and jailed for a DWI, he spent 2 years in solitary confinement until eventually charges were dismissed. From day one, Slevin says he pleaded for medical help to treat his depression, and his request went ignored.
Walking by me every day, watching me deteriorate, day after day after day, and did nothing at all to get me any help.
Just take a look at these photos. The day Slevin was arrested and the day he finally made it out. He even told us a story about pulling his own tooth because they refused to let him see a dentist.
I wanted people to know that the people of the Doña County Jail that are doing things like this to people and getting away with it.
I have never seen or been with a braver man who stood up to these guys for what they did to him.
As a result of confinement, Slevin now suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder and says he'll be medicated for the rest of his life.
It affects everybody, and it's not good for this country. It's not good for Mr. Slevin, for sure. It's not good for this country. It has to stop.
I just want to one more time say that this particular case happened in Doña Ana County at their jail, not part of the State Department of Corrections that Greg is in charge of. We could probably agree, the two of you would find some consensus, that there is an appropriate time and place and usage for segregation.
Well, yes, but
This clearly isn't it, but what would be an appropriate use of segregation, and how would we use it?
I'm sure I disagree with Greg on this issue because I would come from a different perspective. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture said 15 days is the limit to isolation. And we in this country, not just in New Mexico, across the country, do it for years. And so, yes, is there a moment where solitary is used for some particularly violent or particularly inflammatory situation? Yes. But the goal when you put someone in isolation is to get them out as soon as possible. So the person who puts them there should be tasked with the job of trying to find a way to get them out as quickly as possible.
Secretary?
Well, we actually disagree on less than Mr. Coy thinks we do, but I would tell you this, that I think, though, the only area that we might struggle with is putting absolute time frames on how it is that you manage predatory violent
Matt,
criminals.
last thought.
Well, I would say that in most countries in the world, Michael Storer wouldn't be in a solitary cell. So why he needs to be in New Mexico is makes no logical sense, other than people don't like him. And, well, people don't like people in prison. I give you that, but that doesn't mean they have to be in solitary.
One of the things I appreciate about this conversation is that we come from different views, but I think the goals here might be the same, and the goal is that once somebody gets out of the facility, that they become a better person than they were before, and how we go about getting there is still to be determined.
Right.
We know that there's some room for improvement, at least in Doña Ana County and in Valencia County, and I'm sure you're humble enough to say that there's always room for improvement at your facilities as well.
Oh, okay, that's good. Good to hear that.
So I appreciate both of you. I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of you. I do a lot of stories with you two because it's an important topic, and so thank you both for being here.
Once again, thank you for inviting us.
All right, thank you. Get this. Here's a handshake.